It's always exciting when we get to bring Jim O'Leary, the Ollie instructor, onto the program because he knows an awful lot about space.
Yes.
And Jim, we just had one of the big space events of the whole year just happened. Those astronauts returning to Earth, splashing down. We know they were stuck up there for a while. We know that part of it. We've talked about it. What I brought you in for today is we want to know what's next for those guys.
Yeah, they were up there for 8 to 9 months, 8.5 months, something like that. Unexpectedly, of course.
Yes.
So they have this long rehab program, about 45 days. They go through meetings with therapists and physicians at NASA Johnson. So they're working on their ability to walk carefully again. They're told not to drive for a week or two because you're still lightheaded. You could faint.
Jeez.
It's not what you want.
Not what you want when you're driving. No.
Welcome back.
But just walking through your house, you take a right to go into a room, and that kind of motion can set your ears. Yeah, so you have to be very careful. Yeah. So they have people walking with them all the time, sort of holding their arms, making sure they're steady. But that goes away after about a week or two.
Okay.
But then all the other things take sometimes weeks or months in some cases. And that's all due to the fact that what we live with all the time, gravity.
Yeah.
We don't give it a second thought. But you go into space and click like that, it's gone. And all of a sudden your body, it reacts in 100 different ways over time or immediately. And the thing that affects them right away is that gravity is pulling fluids down in your legs. So your heart's pumping hard to push things up. Now your heart is still pumping hard. So all of a sudden all these fluids are going into your upper body. So your torso expands, your head gets puffy. And the astronauts have this round face. And they come back, that goes away immediately. So that's one of the quick things. But that causes some nasal congestion. So they can't smell very well. Some of them say they can't taste at all. So the food is very bland. And some of them
just go spicy. Go spicy.
Right.
That's exactly what they do. There's a lot of hot sauces on the station. Right, exactly. Right, that's the way they do it. And but some of them don't eat as much as they normally do. They lose weight. They don't sleep well. They lose. Most of them say they lose 2 to 3 hours of sleep at night.
I wonder, is zero gravity sleep better than gravity sleep?
They like that because they're sleeping, as you would think of it, standing up. They're in a little, almost like an old-fashioned phone booth-sized cubicle.
Interesting.
And they're strapped to the wall. And if you see them sleeping, they're like this because gravity just isn't there, so their arms are floating in front.
That's so funny. I never thought about how an astronaut sleeps.
Yeah.
You know?
So let me ask you this. They've got to go through all this sort of, it's almost like rehabbing from an injury. They've got to do all these different things to get used to being back on Earth. When they're still in the space station, are they doing anything to try to mitigate that?
Absolutely, yeah. They go through a required 2 to 2.5 hours of exercise a day. So they've got resistance machines, strength training, because you start losing muscle and bone mass because your muscles and your bones aren't working as hard.
Sure.
So if you didn't do anything, you'd come back, you'd be able to walk for weeks and weeks and weeks. So this helps. It helps get over some of that debilitating effect. So the muscles build up, the legs build up. But that's the problem they have coming back to Earth because they're still, dealing with that, having spent so much time in space.
Whew. That's fascinating.
It is very
I never really
fascinating.
thought about the rehab process of an astronaut coming back to Earth, especially after they've been up there for so long.
Right.
So there's two things I want to get to still. Now that we're talking about what it was like for somebody 10 months in space, the big topic, at least from certain people right now, is, are we ever going to go to Mars?
Oh, yeah.
And so when you think about, this is the rehab you have to do from 10 months, but to get to Mars and then to potentially come back, it's going to be a lot longer than that.
It's going to be several years.
Have they, do you think that it would be a more intense, would they have to try to work out more? Do we even know yet what it would do to the body?
They're studying a lot of that right now because one of the problems, you spend maybe 7 or 8 months going to Mars in zero gravity. And you get there, if you're going to land, all of a sudden you're under the pull of gravity of Mars gravity, which is less than Earth, but it's still more than you've experienced for months. You've got to be able to control a spacecraft while you're undergoing this increasing gravity all of a sudden. That's going to be really tricky.
Yeah, if you're not allowed to drive a car for a week or
That's
two,
right, and all of a sudden.
driving the space shuttle or the little lunar rover and then passing out in the middle of the desert of Mars might not be great.
And the other is radiation. The astronauts in Earth orbit are under the radiation belts of the Earth, but they're still exposed to more radiation than you and I are. So there's been studies that show there's an increase in cardiovascular disease among astronauts that go into space. And for those that go to the moon, it's even more.
Oh, interesting.
Because they're outside the radiation belts, more cosmic rays, more solar radiation. But if you're going for 8 months, That's going to really increase.
And if you're going for longer, it's
Yeah.
just going to keep every extra month. There's a little bit more of that troubling radiation that could impact your body.
So what they're looking at is ways to shield spacecraft really, really well, or at least one module of a spacecraft. So when there are like solar flares or solar storms, they can
You could
retreat,
go in there.
which happens at the space station now. They do that.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. Now, there's another solar event, if you will, that
Right.
we can see here.
Yeah,
coming
speaking
up.
of the sun, right?
Yeah.
So Saturday morning
Yay.
at sunrise, sun comes up about 10 minutes to 7. And remember, you have to wear your eclipse glasses to
Yes.
see this.
Yes,
Don't look at the
very
sun.
important.
Yes.
Drag those out from a couple of years ago.
That's right.
And as the sun rises, you'll see a little nick taken out of the left side of the sun, and that's the moon starting to move off the sun, because the eclipse has been happening for hours before. We're just seeing the very end of it. So it comes up, and within, I think it's 10 or 12 minutes, it's over. So
Yep.
you've got to have a low horizon, at the beach or somewhere else.
Okay.
Have your eclipse glasses, be ready for sunrise, hope for good weather,
Yeah.
and you'll see it.
Well, that's my suggestion for
All
everybody at
Saturday
home.
morning plans.
Get up a little early, go out to the beach, and enjoy that eclipse sunrise, very rare moment. We've got such a great spot to
Yeah,
kind of
indeed.
sit back and watch
Exactly.
it from.
And then go get yourself some breakfast after that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the move. A solar eclipse and then some sunny side up eggs.
There you go.
Perfect.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming in. It's always a
Sure.
pleasure and a joy talking to you.
Sure,
And
great to do
I
it.
feel like we always walk away learning something new. Well, coming up, maybe you're going to learn something new. We're going to take a behind-the-scenes peek at how BB Healthcare trains their nursing students for the real world.